Hey guys, I'm Paul the Motor Guy, and welcome to my channel, where I pass on riding tips, practice drills, and defensive riding strategies to fellow riders. Now, I'm a rider coach, a motorcycle sergeant, and owner and instructor at Pro Rider Center, Texas. Now, in this video, I'm going to go over emergency braking. Now, to attain the proper braking effectiveness, you must be able to operate the brakes almost to wheel lockup, which is referred to as impending skid or threshold braking. Now, proper threshold braking is always more efficient than engaging ABS. I will give you 7 tips and I will ride it for you. And at the end of this video, I'm going to demonstrate the difference between how motor officers are taught to emergency brake versus civilians. So hang tight. Now, emergency braking is a skill that must be automatic because there isn't a lot of time to think when an emergency braking situation presents itself. Now, the thing is that you'll never know when you need this skill. It could be the first day you start riding or 20 years into it. Now, I tell all the students in my basic rider course, if the only time you practice emergency braking is the 45 minutes in class, there's no way you will remember what to do when the time comes to use it. So first, let's talk about how the brakes work on a motorcycle. If you ride a cruiser type motorcycle, about 70% of the stopping power comes from the front brake and about 30% from the rear brake. If you ride a sport bike, it can be up to 9% front brakes and 10% rear brake. Now this is due to the motorcycle being much lighter. Now, let me demonstrate why the front brake is so effective. So now I'm going to demonstrate why the front brake lever is responsible for the majority of the braking power when you ride a motorcycle. Now again, anywhere from 70% to 90%, depending on what kind of motorcycle you're riding. So now to illustrate this point, I'm going to rub my foot back and forth across the ground. And as you can see, it's pretty easy, not much resistance. Okay, now I'm going to add more weight to my foot and then try to rub it back and forth across the ground. Now, as you can see, as I add more weight to my foot, it creates more friction and it makes it harder for me to rub my foot back and forth across the ground. So now I'm going to use this water bottle to help illustrate. And I hope this turns out okay. I hope you can see this. I put a little color in the water, so that way I hope you can see it on camera. So again, if you apply the front brakes properly, the weight would transfer forward. So now the weight goes to the front tire, it winds out the tire, and it gets the same gripping effect because of the friction, okay? But now remember, as the weight shifts forward, the back of the bike gets lighter, so you don't need as much rear brake as you think. Now, let's go over the tips for emergency braking. Tip number 1 is how to use the front brake. So there are a couple of things I want to go over when it comes to the front brake. The first thing is this. When you apply the front brake, it is a progressive squeeze. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way to 100%. Now, the faster you squeeze, the shorter your stop will be. So let's take a look at what a faster squeeze looks like. It would be like this. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Now, at work we teach 50% for the initial squeeze, then 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Now by doing this, the weight shifts quicker, thus making for a shorter stop. But this takes a lot of practice, so I would not recommend you starting out doing it this way. Now also when you apply the front brake, you don't want to modulate the front brake lever. You want a continuous squeeze. Now, it is very important that you do not grab the front brake lever. You never want to go from 0 to 100% like in this next video. This can cause the front wheel to lock up and skid, which is not good. Now, if you don't have ABS and you lock up the front wheel, you have about half a second to release the front brake lever and then reapply it properly. If not, the front wheel will wash out, causing a low side crash. Now, we've all seen those videos on YouTube. Now, if you have ABS and it doesn't malfunction, it will prevent you from crashing, but it will make for a longer stop. Now, if you do happen to engage ABS, do not release the brakes on the motorcycle to try to deactivate the ABS event. You want to maintain the front brake lever and rear pedal pressure. The ABS will deactivate itself when it's no longer needed. Now, also, if you grab the front brake lever and you're lucky enough not to crash, you won't get that crucial weight transfer, which will cause for a longer stop. Another common mistake I see is that riders will not continue to squeeze the front brake lever to 100%. Now, this is what I call leaving brake on the table. If you haven't seen the video I did on this, be sure to go check it out after this video. I will leave a link up top and in the description below. Now, tip number 2 is the rear brake. Now, when applying the rear brake, you want to use light to moderate pressure on the rear brake pedal. And you do not want to pump the brake pedal. When applying the rear brake, it is a smooth press, not a stomp. And as the weight of the motorcycle continues to shift forward, some riders will trail off the rear brake. Now in this next video, I'm going to show you what it looks like when trailing off the rear brake. As you continue to squeeze the front brake lever and the weight starts to shift forward, you slowly start releasing the rear brake. Now, if your back tire locks up and starts to skid, and your front tire and your back tire are aligned, you can slowly trail off the rear brake to reduce the skid. But if your back tire is in a skid and the front and back tires are not aligned, you must hold the skid until your back tire is aligned with the front tire. Then you can slowly start to trail off or release the rear brake. If you release the rear brake before the tires are aligned, the rear tire will quickly align itself with the front tire, causing a high side crash. If you find that you're having a lot of rear tire skids, just use less pressure when applying the rear brake. Now, tip number 3, apply both brakes to stop. When emergency braking, you want to simultaneously apply both front and rear brakes. By using both brakes, you will get more effective braking power. Now, tip number 4, check your side mirrors. Now, this is very important, especially in emergency braking situations, because if you stop properly, you can stop quicker than any vehicle on the road. So you want to check your mirror to make sure the vehicles behind you are stopping. Now, tip number 5, squeeze the tank. Now, if you want, you can squeeze the tank with your knees to keep you from sliding forward. Now, tip number 6, keep your chin up. If you keep your chin up, it will help keep the motorcycle from leaning to one side or the other once you get stopped. When you look down, the motorcycle will tend to fall to the side that you're looking. Tip number 7, the stopping sequence. First, you want to make sure your handlebars are square. Then you want to roll off the throttle and squeeze in the clutch. Now, as you're squeezing in the clutch, you want to start applying both front and rear brakes properly while downshifting into first gear. The next video will show how I downshift when emergency braking. Once stopped, work toward putting the left foot down while covering the rear brake with your right foot. This will put you in a great takeoff position if for any reason you need to pull off to avoid being struck from behind. I did a video on why I think it is important to be in first gear after emergency braking. Now, I will leave a link in the description below as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that go into emergency braking properly. So you have to practice this in order to be successful. Now, before I do my demo, I want to talk about consistency when it comes to emergency braking. When I work on this with riders, we will make several runs and each stop will be at a different distance. Now, the problem with this is that when that car pulls out in front of you or that traffic light is turning red, you don't know which stop you're going to get, which makes you hesitate because you don't know if you can pull it off or not. And this will usually end up in a crash. So what this means is that you want to practice this enough so that your stops become consistent. Now, by doing this, you remove the hesitation and the doubt, and you're able to make quicker, better decisions. It doesn't take much to practice this exercise. All you need is enough space for you to get up to speed safely and a designated point where you're going to start your braking. I recommend starting out at about 20 miles per hour. Then you can increase your speed as you improve. Now, 30 miles an hour is probably the fastest you'll need to go because it's more about the technique than the speed. Now, for my demo, I will run it at 20 miles per hour in second gear, then 25 miles an hour in second gear, then 30 miles an hour in third gear. And I will downshift to first gear before I come to a stop. As you're watching, I want you to pay close attention to how my inputs are smooth and under control, how I keep my body upright, and how I keep my chin up. Now, let's go ride this thing. Now I'm going to show you the 30 mph demo again. But this time I will show you how I squeeze the front brake lever during the stop. Okay, so in this next video, I'm going to show you the difference in stopping distance using the way that motor officers are taught to use the front brake lever. Now remember, the initial squeeze is at 50%. So this is how this is going to work. So for the first stop, I will use the progressive braking pressure, which is taught to civilian riders. And then for the second stop, I will use the way that motor officers are taught. Now after each stop, I will place a cone down to mark the stopping points. I will do this exercise at 35 miles an hour. So let's check it out. This photo shows the difference in stopping distance. Now this was my first stop, and this was my second stop. My second stop was almost 9 feet shorter. Now I hope you were able to get some value out of this video. If you did, let me know in the comment sections below. And don't forget to subscribe. Now, until next time, practice, 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 and ride safe.